The words cut through the crowded gym like a blade through silk. Honestly, wives like you should just stay out of the gym entirely. You're disrupting the serious athlete's focus with your amateur hour routines. Ashley Roberts, my husband's personal trainer, stood there in her perfectly coordinated athletic wear, her blonde ponytail swaying as she gestured dismissively at my workout clothes. Around us, the evening crowd at Iron Peak Fitness had gone silent. 20 pairs of eyes watching this public humiliation unfold in the free weights section. My husband David stood frozen beside her, his face flushed with embarrassment, though I couldn't tell if it was for me or because of me. Instead of the tears or angry outburst everyone expected, I simply smiled, set down my dumbbells with deliberate precision, and said, "Thank you for that insight, Ashley. I'll certainly keep it in mind." Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Jennifer Martinez, though everyone calls me Jen, and at 42, I thought I had figured out how to navigate the complexities of marriage, motherhood, and starting over in a new city. 3 years ago, we moved from Los Angeles to Phoenix when David got a promotion with his tech sales company. It was supposed to be our fresh start, a chance to build something better for our family. What I didn't realize was that I would be the one doing all the building while David focused on building his new image. In Los Angeles, I had been the fitness director at Premier Wellness, a high-end chain with 12 locations across Southern California. I had spent 15 years climbing the ladder in the fitness industry, earning certifications in everything from nutritional counseling to business management. I knew how to design programs that transformed lives, how to motivate people who had given up on themselves, and most importantly, how to run a fitness facility that actually made money. When we decided to move to Phoenix, I made the sacrifice that so many women make. I put my career ambitions in a box marked "someday" and focused on supporting David's dreams instead. The transition hadn't been easy. Phoenix was different from LA, more spread out, more conservative in some ways. While David threw himself into his new position, traveling frequently and working late nights to prove himself, I found myself adrift. Our daughter Sophia was 14 when we moved, angry about leaving her friends behind, and suspicious of this desert city that felt nothing like home. I became the family's emotional anchor, smoothing over Sophia's adjustment issues, managing the household, and trying to create stability in a place where everything felt temporary. For the first 2 years, I convinced myself this was just a phase. David was establishing himself, Sophia was adapting to her new school, and I was simply being supportive. I told myself I would get back to my career once everyone else was settled. I started small, getting my Arizona certifications updated, researching the local fitness scene, even visiting a few gyms to see where I might fit in. But every time I brought up the possibility of returning to work, David found reasons why it wasn't the right time. Sophia needed more attention. The house required renovations. His work schedule was too unpredictable to manage childcare logistics. Then, about 8 months ago, David announced he was getting a personal trainer. He had gained weight since the move. His stress levels were high, and he wanted to get back in shape. Iron Peak Fitness was close to his office, convenient for lunch, hour workouts, and came highly recommended by his colleagues. I encouraged him, even offered to join him for couples sessions, but he insisted this was something he needed to do alone. "It's not about us, Jen," he had said. "It's about me figuring out who I want to be in this new chapter of my life." Ashley Roberts was everything I wasn't at that moment in my life. 29 years old, she had that effortless confidence that comes from never having had to compromise your dreams for someone else's. She was Instagram perfect, with her carefully curated feed of workout videos and motivational quotes that garnered thousands of likes. She had arrived in Phoenix 2 years earlier from Miami, where she claimed to have trained professional athletes, though I later learned the details of those claims were significantly embellished. At first, David's sessions with Ashley seemed like exactly what he needed. He was more energetic, started eating better, and began talking about fitness goals with an enthusiasm I hadn't seen in years. I was genuinely happy for him, even proud. When he started staying late at the gym for extended sessions or meeting Ashley for weekend training consultations, I supported it. I wanted him to succeed, to feel good about himself again. But as the months passed, subtle changes began to appear. David started critiquing my own fitness routine, making comments about how I should be more dedicated to my health. He bought me a gym membership to Iron Peak for my birthday, which I initially saw as thoughtful, but the way he presented it felt more like an assignment than a gift. "Ashley says you should start with the basics," he had said, handing me the membership card. "She's offered to design a beginner program for you." The condescension stung, but I bit my tongue. David had forgotten that I had spent 15 years in the fitness industry, that I had certifications he didn't even know existed, that I had once managed facilities that made Iron Peak look like a community rec center. But I had been out of the game for 3 years, and in his mind, that apparently made me a beginner. My first few visits to Iron Peak were awkward but manageable. I kept to myself, did my workouts, and tried to stay out of Ashley's way. The gym itself was nice enough, though I could see inefficiencies everywhere. The equipment layout was poor, creating bottlenecks during peak hours. The staff looked bored and disengaged. The group fitness program was uninspired, running the same basic classes that every chain gym had offered for the past decade. But it wasn't my business, literally or figuratively, so I kept my observations to myself. Ashley seemed to tolerate my presence initially, offering the kind of fake friendliness that service industry professionals use with customers they don't particularly like, but can't afford to offend. She would wave from across the gym, occasionally, ask how my workout was going, and make generic comments about consistency being key to results. But I noticed how she watched me, how her eyes narrowed slightly when she saw me using equipment with proper form, or when other gym members asked me for advice. The turning point came on a particularly busy Tuesday evening in January. The gym was packed with New Year's resolution crowds, and the free weight section was a maze of people trying to navigate around each other. I was working through a routine I had designed for myself, nothing fancy, just solid compound movements that I knew would deliver results. I had been lifting consistently for over 20 years, and while I wasn't trying to show off, I also wasn't hiding my capabilities. That's when I noticed David talking to Ashley near the squat racks, their conversation intense and private. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but their body language was intimate in a way that made my stomach clench. Ashley kept touching, his arm, leaning in close to demonstrate proper form, her hand lingering on his shoulder longer than necessary. David was eating up the attention, laughing at her jokes, his posture straightening in a way I recognized from our early dating days. I tried to focus on my own workout, but I kept glancing over at them, noticing things I had been unconsciously ignoring for months. The way Ashley's face lit up when David walked into the gym, how she always seemed to be available for his sessions, even when the schedule board showed her as booked. The special attention she gave him, the extra time she spent perfecting his form, the encouraging touches that seemed to happen naturally during their interactions. When my workout was finished, I approached them to say hello, thinking maybe I could finally break through the awkwardness and establish some kind of friendly relationship with this woman who was clearly important to my husband. David seemed surprised to see me, almost guilty, which should have been my first real warning sign. "Hey, babe," he said, his voice slightly higher than normal. "Great workout tonight. Ashley was just showing me some new techniques for building core stability." "Ah!" Ashley turned to me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Oh, hi, Jennifer. How was your session? I noticed you were working on some pretty basic movements tonight. That's smart, staying within your comfort zone." The comment was perfectly crafted to sound supportive while being subtly insulting. I had been performing Romanian deadlifts with perfect form, hardly a basic movement, but Ashley had managed to frame it as beginner-level work. I smiled and nodded, not wanting to create a scene in front of David. Actually, I replied carefully, I was working on some functional movement patterns. After 15 years in the fitness industry, I've learned that consistency with fundamentals usually beats flashy techniques. Ashley's smile faltered for just a moment. Oh, you worked in fitness? That's cute. Where, like a yoga studio or something? The dismissiveness was so casual, so perfectly delivered, that I almost admired the skill of it. David looked uncomfortable, shifting his weight from one foot to the other, but he didn't correct her assumption or elaborate on my background. In that moment, I realized he had never told Ashley about my professional experience. To her, I was just another bored housewife trying to stay in shape. Something like that, I said quietly, deciding this wasn't the time or place for a detailed explanation of my credentials. Over the following weeks, I started paying closer attention to the dynamics at Iron Peak. I noticed how Ashley ruled the personal training department like a queen bee, how the other trainers deferred to her opinions, how she seemed to have unusual influence with the gym's owner, Bob Stevens. I watched her work with other clients and saw that while she was competent, she wasn't exceptional. Her techniques were solid but unimaginative, her programming was generic, and her approach to client relationships seemed to prioritize ego-stroking over actual results. But what bothered me most was how she interacted with other women at the gym, particularly the wives and girlfriends of her male clients. There was a pattern of subtle intimidation, small comments designed to make women feel unwelcome or incompetent. She had created an environment where men felt empowered and women felt diminished, and she did it so skillfully that most people didn't even realize it was happening. I started documenting these interactions, not with any particular plan in mind, but because my professional instincts were screaming that something was fundamentally wrong with the culture Ashley had created. I watched her criticize a woman's form loudly enough for others to hear, saw her schedule male clients during peak hours while relegating female clients to off-peak times, and noticed how she consistently undercharged men while finding extra fees to add to women's training packages. The breaking point came on a Thursday evening in late January. The gym was particularly crowded, and I was waiting for a squat rack to become available. Ashley was training David nearby, and I could hear her voice carrying across the weight room as she explained some new technique she wanted him to try. She was being theatrical, drawing attention to their session, and I realized this was part of her method. She used her sessions with attractive male clients as a form of advertising, a way to showcase her expertise and availability. When the squat rack finally opened up, I moved in to begin my workout. I had just started my warm-up sets when Ashley appeared beside me, clipboard in hand, her expression serious. "Excuse me, Jennifer," she said, her voice loud enough to carry to nearby gym members. "I need to talk to you about your form. I've been watching you, and I'm concerned about the safety issues I'm seeing." I paused mid-rep, setting the bar down carefully. "I'm sorry, what safety issues?" Ashley launched into a detailed critique of my squatting technique, pointing out supposed flaws that didn't exist and suggesting modifications that would actually make the movement less effective. She spoke with authority, using technical terms incorrectly, and maintaining eye contact in a way that felt more like intimidation than instruction. "The thing is," she continued, her voice gaining confidence as she noticed people listening, "a lot of women your age think they can just jump back into serious lifting without proper guidance. It's dangerous, and honestly, it's disruptive to the people who are here to train seriously." I felt my face flush, but I kept my voice level. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "I appreciate your concern, Ashley, but I'm comfortable with my form. I've been lifting for over 20 years. She laughed, a sound that managed to be both dismissive and condescending. "Look, I'm sure you did some lifting back in the day, But the industry has evolved. What might have been acceptable in a basic gym setting isn't going to cut it in a facility like this. We have standards here. Around us, the weight room had grown quiet. David was watching from his position near the cable machines, his expression unreadable. Other gym members were pretending to focus on their workouts while clearly listening to every word. This was the moment Ashley had been building toward, the public establishment of hierarchy that would put me firmly in my place. That's when she delivered the line that would change everything. Honestly, wives like you should just stay out of the gym entirely. You're disrupting the serious athlete's focus with your amateur hour routines. The silence that followed was deafening. I stood there, bar still across my shoulders, feeling the weight of every eye in the room. This was my moment of choice. I could respond with anger, defend myself loudly, make a scene that would confirm every stereotype Ashley was promoting about emotional, defensive women. Or I could take a different path. I carefully re-racked the weight, turned to face Ashley with a calm smile and said, "Thank you for that insight, Ashley. I'll certainly keep it in mind." Then I gathered my things and walked out of the gym with my head held high, feeling the stares of everyone who had witnessed my public humiliation. But what Ashley didn't know, what David had apparently never told her, was that she had just declared war on someone who knew this industry better than she ever would. As I drove home through the Phoenix evening, my mind was already working, processing everything I had observed over the past months, cataloging every detail of Ashley's operation and finding the cracks in her carefully constructed facade. She had made the mistake of underestimating me, of assuming that because I had stepped back from my career, I had somehow lost my expertise. That night, for the first time in 3 years, I opened my laptop and began researching. I pulled up my old contacts, my certifications, my network of industry professionals who had built successful fitness businesses across the country. I started making notes, creating plans, and remembering who I used to be before I became just David's wife and Sophia's mother. Ashley Roberts had no idea what she had just unleashed, but she was about to find out that some women don't just get mad, they get strategic. The first thing I did when I got home that night was pour myself a glass of wine and sit in my home office, staring at the wall where my fitness industry awards used to hang before we moved. David had suggested we pack them away during the move to make space for new achievements, but now I wondered if he had been embarrassed by reminders of my professional success. Those awards represented 15 years of building something meaningful, of transforming not just individual lives, but entire fitness communities. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found the name I was looking for. Marcus Rivera had been my assistant manager at Premier Wellness for 5 years before starting his own consulting firm that specialized in fitness industry analytics. If anyone could help me understand what was really happening at Iron Peak Fitness, it would be Marcus. "Jen Martinez," his voice came through the phone warm with surprise. "I was just thinking about you last week. How's the desert treating you?" "It's been an adjustment," I said carefully. "Marcus, I need a favor. Can you run a business analysis on a gym here in Phoenix? Iron Peak Fitness in Scottsdale." There was a pause. "That's oddly specific. Are you thinking about getting back into the game?" "Maybe. It's complicated, but I need to know everything about this place. Financial health, ownership structure, employee turnover, customer retention rates, everything you can dig up." Marcus was quiet for a moment. "Jen, I've known you for 8 years. You don't ask for business intelligence unless you're planning something significant. What's really going on?" I found myself telling him everything. The move to Phoenix, putting my career on hold, David's training sessions with Ashley, and finally, the humiliation I had endured earlier that evening. Marcus listened without interrupting, and when I finished, he was silent for a long moment. "So let me get this straight," he said finally. This trainer publicly humiliated you in front of a room full of people, not knowing that you're one of the most successful fitness directors on the West Coast, and your husband just stood there and let it happen? That's about the size of it. And now you want to know if this gym is vulnerable. I want to know everything. Marcus chuckled, but there was no humor in it. Give me 48 hours. I'll send you a complete breakdown. But Jen, be careful. Revenge in the fitness industry can get messy quickly. I'm not looking for revenge, Marcus. I'm looking for justice. After we hung up, I opened my laptop and began my own research. I started with Ashley Roberts' social media presence, studying her Instagram account with the eye of someone who understood fitness marketing. Her follower count was impressive at first glance, but when I used analytics tools, I still had access. From my Premier Wellness days, I discovered that nearly 30% of her followers were fake accounts. Her engagement rates were artificially inflated, and many of her supposedly candid workout videos were clearly staged. I dug deeper into her background, searching for the professional certifications she claimed to have. Her bio mentioned training, professional athletes in Miami, but when I reached out to contacts I had in the Florida fitness scene, no one had heard of her. The certifications she listed were either expired or from organizations that weren't recognized by industry standards. Ashley Roberts had built her reputation on smoke and mirrors, and somehow no one at Iron Peak had bothered to verify her credentials. Next, I researched Iron Peak Fitness itself. The gym had been open for 6 years, owned by Bob Stevens, a former corporate executive who had bought the facility as an investment property. Bob lived in Sedona and rarely visited the Phoenix location, leaving the day-to-day operations entirely to his staff. This explained a lot about why Ashley had been able to establish such unchecked authority. With an absentee owner and no real management structure, she had essentially appointed herself as the unofficial director of the facility. The more I learned, the more problems I identified. The gym's online reviews were mediocre, with consistent complaints about staff attitude and poor customer service. Several negative reviews specifically mentioned feeling unwelcome or intimidated by trainers, particularly female customers who felt judged or dismissed. There were multiple complaints about billing irregularities, with customers being charged for services they didn't authorize or receiving bills that didn't match their agreed-upon rates. I spent the next several hours creating a detailed analysis of Iron Peak's operations, identifying inefficiencies and missed opportunities that were costing the business money. The group fitness program was underutilized because the class schedule conflicted with peak membership hours. The personal training department was generating revenue, but had terrible client retention rates, meaning they were constantly having to find new customers instead of building long-term relationships. The facility itself was well-equipped, but poorly organized, creating bottlenecks that made members frustrated during busy periods. By the time David came home from his late dinner meeting, I had filled 3 pages with notes and had a clear picture of Iron Peak's vulnerabilities. He found me in the office, laptop open, papers spread across the desk. "Working on something?" he asked, loosening his tie. "Just catching up on some industry reading," I replied, closing the laptop. "How was your dinner?" "Productive. We're close to closing the Henderson account." He sat down on the edge of the desk, a gesture that used to feel intimate, but now seemed presumptuous. "Look, about tonight at the gym. Ashley was just trying to help. She's very passionate about proper form and safety." I studied his face, looking for signs that he understood how inappropriate Ashley's behavior had been. Instead, I saw someone who was already rationalizing the incident, rewriting it in his mind to make it more palatable. "She told me wives should stay out of the gym entirely, David. In front of everyone." He winced slightly. "She probably didn't mean it the way it sounded. Ashley can be a little intense about fitness standards, but that's what makes her such a good trainer." "Is it?" I asked quietly. "What exactly makes her a good trainer?" David launched into a detailed explanation of Ashley's methods, her attention to detail, her ability to push him beyond his comfort zone. As he talked, I realized he was repeating phrases and concepts that Ashley had obviously fed him, presenting her philosophy as if he had developed these insights himself. She had done more than just train his body. She had trained his mind to see her as an expert, and me as an amateur. "I think I'm going to take a break from Iron Peak for a while," I said when he finished. Relief flickered across his face. "That might be a good idea. Let things cool down. Maybe you could try that yoga studio Sophia mentioned. Something more suited to your fitness level." The condescension in his voice was so casual, so automatic, that I realized this was how he had been thinking about me for months. In his mind, I had gone from being a fitness industry professional to being a middle-aged woman who needed beginner-level guidance. Ashley hadn't just insulted me publicly. She had been systematically undermining my credibility with my own husband. That night, I lay awake listening to David sleep, my mind working through the plan that was beginning to form. Ashley Roberts had made a critical error in judgment. She had assumed that because I wasn't currently working in fitness, I had somehow lost my expertise and connections. She had no idea that I was still in touch with some of the most influential people in the industry, that my reputation was still intact among professionals who mattered. The next morning, I called my former mentor, Patricia Williams, who had built a fitness empire across 3 states before selling her company and retiring to Santa Fe. Patricia had always been more than a boss. She had been a friend and a guide through every major decision in my career. "Jennifer, darling." Her voice came through the phone like a warm hug. "How are you adjusting to desert life?" "It's been educational," I said. "Patricia, I need advice. I'm thinking about getting back into the industry, but the situation is complicated." I explained the situation at Iron Peak, describing Ashley's behavior and the gym's operational problems without revealing my ultimate intentions. Patricia listened with the attention of someone who had seen every variation of fitness industry drama over her 40-year career. "This Ashley person sounds like a classic case of small pond syndrome," Patricia said when I finished. "She's built her identity around being the big fish in a very small pond, and she sees any potential competition as a threat to be eliminated. The question is, what do you want to do about it?" "I want my life back," I said honestly. "I want to work again, to use my skills for something meaningful. But I also want justice for all the women who have been made to feel unwelcome or inadequate by someone who shouldn't even be in a position of authority." Patricia was quiet for a moment. "Have you considered that this might be an opportunity rather than just a problem? If this gym is as poorly managed as you describe, and if the owner is as disengaged as you think, there might be a way to address both issues simultaneously." "What do you mean?" "I mean that sometimes the best revenge is success. Instead of just exposing this Ashley person's incompetence, why not demonstrate your own competence? Show them what real fitness leadership looks like." After we hung up, I spent the afternoon walking through my neighborhood, thinking about Patricia's words. She was right that this could be an opportunity, but it would require careful planning and perfect execution. I would need to understand exactly how Iron Peak operated, who the key players were, and where the pressure points were that could create change. That evening, I received Marcus's report via encrypted email. The financial analysis was even more damning than I had expected. Iron Peak Fitness was struggling financially, with declining membership numbers and increasing operational costs. The personal training department, despite being the most profitable segment, had a client retention rate that was 30% below industry standards. Staff turnover was high, particularly among female employees who rarely lasted more than 6 months. Most importantly, Marcus had uncovered that Bob Stevens was actively looking for someone to take over day-to-day operations of the gym. He had been in discussions with a management company that specialized in fitness facility operations, but the deal had stalled over disagreements about staffing and operational philosophy. Bob was frustrated with the constant complaints and poor online reviews, But he didn't have the expertise or time to fix the problems himself. The opportunity Patricia had hinted at was real. Iron Peak needed professional management, and I had the exact skills and experience required to turn the facility around. But getting into that position would require convincing Bob that I was the solution to his problems, and that meant demonstrating my capabilities in a way that couldn't be ignored or dismissed. I spent the next 3 days developing a comprehensive business plan for Iron Peak's transformation. I analyzed their current membership demographics and identified untapped market segments. I designed new group fitness programs that would appeal to different age groups and fitness levels. I created staff training protocols that would improve customer service and reduce turnover. Most importantly, I developed a strategy for rebuilding the gym's reputation and creating a welcoming environment for all members. The plan was thorough and professional, but it was also theoretical. To make it credible, I needed insider knowledge of Iron Peak's specific challenges and opportunities. I needed to understand the staff dynamics, the member complaints, and the operational inefficiencies that weren't visible from the outside. That's when I realized I needed to go back to Iron Peak, not as David's wife or as an intimidated gym member, but as a professional conducting research. I needed to observe Ashley's operation from the perspective of someone who understood what to look for. Someone who could identify the specific ways her leadership was damaging the business. On Thursday evening, I returned to Iron Peak for the first time since Ashley's public humiliation. I had spent hours preparing for this visit, choosing my workout clothes carefully to project confidence without appearing confrontational. I arrived during peak hours when the gym would be at its busiest, and Ashley would be most likely to be working with clients. The moment I walked through the front door, I could feel the shift in energy. Several members glanced my way, their expressions curious or sympathetic. Word of Tuesday's incident had clearly spread through the gym's social network, and people were watching to see how I would handle my return. Ashley was training a client near the cable machines, her voice carrying across the gym as she explained some complex movement pattern. She spotted me almost immediately, and I saw her expression harden. She said something to her client and then walked directly toward me, her stride confident and territorial. "Jennifer," she said, her voice loud enough to attract attention. "I wasn't expecting to see you back so soon. I thought we had established that this environment might not be the best fit for your fitness level." I smiled calmly, maintaining eye contact. "I've been thinking about what you said Tuesday night. And you're absolutely right that I should take a more serious approach to my fitness. I'd like to schedule some sessions with one of your trainers to work on proper form and technique." Ashley's confidence faltered slightly. She had expected confrontation or retreat, not a request for services that would put money in the gym's pocket. "Well," she said, recovering quickly, "I suppose I could fit you into my schedule. My rate is $150 per session, and I require a minimum commitment of 12 sessions paid in advance." The price was significantly higher than the standard rates advertised on Iron Peak's website, and the advance payment requirement was clearly designed to discourage me from following through. But Ashley had just made another critical error. She had quoted me a price that violated Iron Peak's published pricing policies, creating documentation of the billing irregularities that Marcus had identified in his report. "That sounds perfect," I said, pulling out my phone. "Should I pay you directly, or does the payment go through the gym's system?" Ashley hesitated. "You can pay me directly, cash or Venmo." Another violation. All personal training fees were supposed to be processed through Iron Peak's payment system to ensure proper tracking and tax reporting. Ashley was essentially running a side business within the gym, keeping the premium charges for herself while paying Iron Peak only their standard commission on the published rates. "Actually, I prefer to pay through official channels," I said. "I'll need receipts for my health savings account." Ashley's jaw tightened. "Fine. I'll set you up in the system at the standard rate, and we can discuss additional charges for specialized programming separately." I agreed cheerfully and scheduled my first session for the following Tuesday. As Ashley walked away, I could see her frustration in the tension of her shoulders. She had tried to price me out of training with her, but I had called her bluff, and now she was stuck working with someone she clearly disliked. Over the next hour, I worked out with a purpose beyond fitness. I observed the gym's operations with a professional eye, noting inefficiencies and missed opportunities that reinforced everything I had identified in my research. I watched Ashley interact with other clients, documenting her methods and identifying patterns of behavior that were problematic from both customer service and liability perspectives. But most importantly, I began building relationships with other gym members. I introduced myself to people I hadn't met before, engaged in friendly conversations, and listened carefully to their experiences at Iron Peak. What I heard confirmed my suspicions about the toxic culture Ashley had created. Sarah, a marketing executive in her 30s, told me about feeling intimidated during group fitness classes where Ashley would single out participants for correction in ways that felt more like public shaming than instruction. Michael, a software engineer, described how Ashley had convinced him to purchase expensive supplements that he later learned were unnecessary and overpriced. Lisa, a teacher, shared her frustration with billing errors that always seemed to favor the gym and were difficult to resolve. These conversations revealed the scope of the problem at Iron Peak. Ashley wasn't just creating an unwelcoming environment for women. She was running operations in ways that violated industry standards and potentially exposed the gym to legal liability. Her behavior was hurting the business, damaging relationships with longtime members, and creating the kind of toxic culture that would eventually destroy Iron Peak's reputation entirely. As I left the gym that night, I felt a sense of clarity about what needed to happen. Iron Peak Fitness could be an excellent facility with the right leadership and management. The equipment was good, the location was convenient, and there was a strong market demand for quality fitness services in the area. But under Ashley's influence, the gym was deteriorating into something that served neither its members nor its owner well. My phone buzzed with a text from David as I got into my car. "Ashley told me you signed up for training sessions with her. That's great, babe. She'll really help you develop a more structured approach to fitness." I stared at the message for a moment, feeling the full weight of how completely Ashley had manipulated the situation. She had turned my return to the gym into evidence of her superior expertise, making it appear that I had recognized her authority and was seeking her guidance. In David's mind, this would confirm everything Ashley had told him about my amateur status and her professional competence. But Ashley had also just made the biggest mistake of her career. By agreeing to train me, she had given me unlimited access to observe her methods, document her violations of professional standards, and gather evidence of the way she was damaging Iron Peak's business. She thought she was humiliating me further by forcing me to acknowledge her expertise publicly. Instead, she had just handed me the keys to her downfall. That night, I updated my business plan for Iron Peak with specific details I had gathered during my observation. I researched Bob Stevens's background more thoroughly, identifying mutual contacts who could provide introductions and references. I began preparing a presentation that would demonstrate not just what was wrong with Iron Peak's current operations, but exactly how those problems could be solved. Most importantly, I started documenting everything about Ashley's methods and behavior. Every overcharge, every policy violation, every instance of inappropriate conduct would become part of a comprehensive case that would make it impossible for Bob to ignore the liability she represented. Ashley Roberts thought she had won by forcing me to accept her authority. She had no idea that she had just given me everything I needed to destroy the empire she had built on intimidation and incompetence. The student was about to become the teacher, and the lesson was going to be unforgettable. My first training session with Ashley was scheduled for Tuesday at 11 in the morning, deliberately chosen during off-peak hours when fewer people would witness whatever power play she had planned. I arrived 15 minutes early, wearing professional athletic wear that projected competence without appearing confrontational. I had my phone set to record audio legally, since Arizona was a one-party consent state, and I carried a small notebook for documenting any incidents that might arise. Ashley kept me waiting 23 minutes, a classic power move designed to establish dominance from the start. When she finally appeared, she was finishing up what appeared to be a personal phone call, laughing loudly about weekend plans while making eye contact with me to ensure I understood that I was less important than her social calendar. "Sorry about that," she said without any trace of actual apology. "Important business call. Are you ready to get started on some real fitness education?" The condescension was immediate and deliberate. Ashley had clearly planned this session as an opportunity to demonstrate my supposed inadequacies to any staff members or clients who might observe our interaction. What she didn't realize was that I was equally prepared, but for entirely different reasons. We began with what Ashley called a basic movement assessment, which consisted of exercises I had been performing correctly for decades. She positioned herself strategically so that other gym members could observe her correcting my form, speaking loudly enough to draw attention to her expertise and my apparent need for fundamental instruction. "Let's start with a basic squat," she announced, her voice carrying across the gym floor. "I want to see what we're working with here before we attempt anything more advanced." I performed a textbook bodyweight squat, maintaining perfect form, while allowing Ashley to position herself as the authority figure. She immediately began critiquing technique that any certified trainer would recognize as flawless, inventing problems that didn't exist and suggesting corrections that would actually compromise proper movement patterns. "You're leaning too far. Forward," she said, demonstrating an exaggerated forward lean that bore no resemblance to my actual movement. "And your depth is inconsistent. This is exactly what I mean about wives needing proper guidance before attempting serious exercise." I nodded thoughtfully, as if absorbing valuable instruction while mentally cataloging every technical error in her assessment. Ashley was revealing fundamental gaps in her knowledge, critiquing perfect form while demonstrating inferior technique herself. Any qualified fitness professional observing this interaction would immediately question her competence. As we moved through her assessment, Ashley continued making statements that violated basic principles of exercise science. She claimed that women over 40 shouldn't perform compound movements because of hormonal limitations. She insisted that lifting more than 15 pounds would cause immediate muscle bulking that would be unfeminine and unattractive. She recommended a nutrition protocol that contradicted established research on metabolic health and would likely result in nutrient deficiencies. Each incorrect statement was delivered with absolute confidence, designed to establish her authority while undermining my knowledge. But Ashley was unknowingly providing me with documentation of professional incompetence that would be devastating when presented to industry peers or regulatory bodies. Halfway through the session, Bob Stevens unexpectedly walked into the gym. I recognized him immediately from photos I had found during my research, a distinguished man in his early 60s with silver hair and the bearing of someone accustomed to making executive decisions. Ashley's demeanor changed instantly, her voice becoming more professional and her behavior more restrained. "Mr. Stevens," she called out, abandoning our session to approach the owner. "What brings you in today? I thought you were staying in Sedona this week." Bob's expression was neutral but not particularly warm. "I had some business in Phoenix and wanted to check on operations. How are things running?" "Excellent as always," Ashley replied smoothly. "Membership retention is strong, and the personal training program continues to generate significant revenue. I was just working with Jennifer here on developing a more structured fitness approach. I saw an opportunity and took it." Walking over to join the conversation, I extended my hand to Bob with a confident smile. "Mr. Stevens, I'm Jennifer Martinez. I've been admiring what you've built here at Iron Peak. The facility has tremendous potential." Bob shook my hand, his businessman's instincts immediately engaged by someone who spoke about potential, rather than just using services. Thank you. Are you new to the area? Relocated from Los Angeles about 3 years ago. I spent 15 years in the fitness industry there before taking time off to focus on family. I kept my tone conversational, not wanting to appear to be positioning myself professionally, but ensuring that Bob understood I spoke from experience rather than just consumer perspective. Ashley's face tightened slightly, but she maintained her professional smile. Jennifer is just getting back into fitness after some time away. We're working on rebuilding her foundation with proper fundamentals. Actually, I said with a gentle laugh, I was the fitness director at Premier Wellness in LA for 8 years before the move. 12 locations, about 15,000 members across the system. I've been impressed by Iron Peak's equipment selection and layout. You've made some excellent choices in your facility design. The atmosphere shifted perceptibly. Bob's attention focused more intently on me, while Ashley's confident demeanor began showing cracks. She clearly hadn't expected me to reveal my professional background, and certainly not to someone whose opinion could affect her position. Premier Wellness, Bob repeated thoughtfully. I'm familiar with that chain. Very successful operation. What brought you to Phoenix? I explained the move for David's career, keeping the conversation light but professional. Bob asked several knowledgeable questions about fitness industry, trends and operational challenges, and I could see him evaluating my responses with the interest of someone who rarely encountered industry professionals in his casual gym visits. Ashley attempted to redirect the conversation several times, but Bob seemed genuinely interested in discussing industry topics with someone who understood the business aspects of fitness facility management. When he mentioned ongoing challenges, with member retention and operational efficiency, I offered general observations based on my experience, careful not to criticize current operations directly. I should let you finish your session, Bob said eventually, but he handed me his business card. If you ever want to discuss the industry further, I'd enjoy the conversation. It's rare to meet someone with your background in a casual setting. After Bob left, Ashley's professional mask slipped completely. You didn't mention you used to work in fitness? She said, her voice tight with barely controlled anger. You never asked, I replied simply. I assumed David had mentioned my background. David said you used to work in an office. He never mentioned anything about fitness industry experience. This revelation was illuminating. Either David had deliberately misrepresented my background to Ashley, or he had minimized my professional accomplishments to the point where they seemed irrelevant. Either way, it explained why Ashley had felt comfortable treating me with such obvious disrespect. Well, Ashley said, regaining some composure, the industry has changed significantly in recent years. What might have worked in a corporate chain environment doesn't necessarily translate to a boutique facility like Iron Peak. We operate at a much higher standard here. The irony was overwhelming. Ashley was lecturing me about standards while demonstrating substandard knowledge and practices throughout our session. But I nodded thoughtfully, maintaining the pretense of receiving valuable education while documenting every problematic statement and behavior. The remainder of our session followed the same pattern. Ashley continued offering advice that ranged from questionable to dangerous, while positioning herself as the expert guide helping me overcome my amateur limitations. She scheduled our next session for Thursday, clearly intending to continue this dynamic of public instruction and correction. But Ashley had made a critical error by allowing Bob Stevens to learn about my professional background. Now there was someone in a position of authority who understood that I spoke from legitimate expertise rather than casual opinion. When the time came to present concerns about Ashley's management of the training program, I would have established credibility with the one person who could make meaningful changes. That afternoon, I called my former colleague Maria Santos, who had become a leading consultant in fitness industry compliance and risk management. I explained the situation at Iron Peak, focusing on the professional and liability issues I had observed rather than the personal conflicts. Jen, What you're describing could expose the gym to significant legal and financial risk, Maria said, after reviewing my notes. Unqualified trainers giving inappropriate advice, billing irregularities, discriminatory treatment of female clients. Any of these issues could result in lawsuits or regulatory problems. That's what I was afraid of. What would you recommend for someone in Bob's position? Immediate comprehensive review of all training staff credentials and practices. Implementation of standardized protocols for client interaction and billing. Probably replacement of anyone who doesn't meet professional standards. Maria paused. But Jen, you realize what you're really describing is a management position that needs to be filled by someone with exactly your qualifications. The thought had occurred to me. Have you considered approaching the owner directly? If he's facing the kind of liability you're describing, he needs professional help whether he realizes it or not. That evening, I spent several hours developing a comprehensive risk assessment for Iron Peak Fitness. I documented every violation of professional standards I had observed, researched comparable liability cases in the fitness industry, and outlined the potential financial consequences Bob could face if current practices continued unchanged. The document was thorough and professional, presenting problems and solutions without personal attacks or emotional language. It demonstrated expertise and offered value while making clear that Iron Peak's current trajectory was unsustainable, from both business and legal perspectives. I also began developing a transition plan that would address Iron Peak's operational problems while maintaining continuity of service for existing clients. The plan included staff retraining protocols, updated billing procedures, and new programming options that would appeal to underserved market segments. Most importantly, it outlined how these changes could be implemented without disrupting the gym's revenue stream. Thursday's training session with Ashley followed a similar pattern to Tuesday's, but with increased tension. Ashley seemed aware that our dynamic had shifted after Bob's unexpected visit, and she was working harder to establish dominance through more aggressive criticism and louder demonstrations of her supposed expertise. "I've been thinking about your movement patterns," she announced as we began warming up. "And I'm concerned about some compensation strategies you've developed over the years. We need to completely rebuild your motor patterns from the ground up." This was fitness industry jargon being used incorrectly to justify unnecessary and potentially harmful interventions. Ashley was essentially claiming that my decades of training had created problems that only she could fix, positioning herself as indispensable while undermining my confidence in my own abilities. But as Ashley continued her critique, I noticed we were attracting an unexpected audience. Marcus Johnson, one of the other trainers, had positioned himself nearby and was clearly listening to Ashley's instruction with a puzzled expression. Marcus had impressive credentials from legitimate organizations, and I could see him evaluating Ashley's methods with growing concern. When Ashley stepped away to retrieve equipment, Marcus approached me quietly. "Excuse me, but I couldn't help overhearing some of the advice you're receiving. Are you experiencing any pain or mobility limitations that would require motor pattern restructuring?" I smiled gratefully. "No pain or limitations. I've been lifting consistently for over 20 years. Marcus nodded, his expression thoughtful. "That's what I thought. Your form looked solid during warm-up. Some of the corrections being suggested don't align with current best practices." This was exactly the kind of professional validation I had hoped to encounter. Marcus was diplomatically expressing concern about Ashley's methods without directly criticizing a colleague, but making it clear that he recognized problematic instruction when he heard it. When Ashley returned, she immediately noticed Marcus's proximity to our session. "Is there something you need, Marcus?" "Just admiring Jennifer's squat form," he replied evenly. "Very solid technique. Whoever taught her did an excellent job." Ashley's jaw tightened. "We're working on some advanced refinements that might not be obvious to casual observation." Marcus nodded politely but didn't move away, creating an awkward dynamic where Ashley had to continue her instruction under the scrutiny of a qualified professional who clearly disagreed with her methods. The session became increasingly tense as Ashley realized her expertise was being evaluated by someone with legitimate credentials. After the session ended, Marcus lingered until Ashley was out of earshot. "I don't usually interfere with other trainers' sessions," he said carefully. "But I wanted to make sure you know that some of the advice you received today contradicts established exercise science principles." "I appreciate that," I replied. "I have to ask, how long has Ashley been the lead trainer here?" "About 18 months. She was hired when the previous training director left suddenly." Marcus hesitated, then seemed to make a decision. "Between you and me, several experienced trainers have left since Ashley took over the program. The culture has become somewhat competitive in ways that don't serve clients well." "Have you considered discussing these concerns with Bob Stevens?" Marcus shook his head. "Ashley has Bob convinced that any criticism of her methods comes from jealousy or outdated thinking. She's very skilled at positioning herself as innovative while making others seem resistant to change." This conversation revealed the scope of Ashley's influence and the methods she used to protect her position. She had isolated herself from peer review by characterizing any criticism as professional jealousy, while simultaneously convincing ownership that her approaches represented cutting-edge methodology. But Marcus's willingness to express concern, even diplomatically, suggested that other staff members were aware of problems with Ashley's leadership. This could be valuable when the time came to present alternative management approaches to Bob Stevens. That weekend, I received an unexpected call from Bob himself. "Jennifer, I hope you don't mind me reaching out directly. I've been thinking about our conversation Tuesday, and I wondered if you might have time to discuss some industry trends I'm curious about." We arranged to meet for coffee Monday morning at a cafe near Iron Peak. Bob arrived precisely on time, carrying a leather portfolio that suggested this was more than casual conversation. "I appreciate you making time for this," he began. "I have to admit, I've been struggling with some operational challenges at Iron Peak, and it's rare to have access to someone with your industry experience." Bob outlined his frustrations with declining member satisfaction, increasing complaints, and difficulty retaining qualified staff. He spoke about his original vision for Iron Peak as a community-focused facility that would serve diverse fitness needs, but acknowledged that current operations didn't match that goal. "I spend most of my time in Sedona now," he explained. "I assumed that hiring qualified staff would allow the facility to run smoothly without constant oversight, but member feedback suggests we're not meeting expectations, and I'm not sure how to address the problems." I listened carefully, asking questions that demonstrated understanding of his challenges while avoiding direct criticism of current management. Bob was clearly frustrated, but seemed uncertain about what changes were needed or how to implement them effectively. "Have you considered bringing in a consultant to assess operations?" I suggested. "Sometimes an outside perspective can identify issues that aren't obvious to people working within the system." "I've thought about it, but most fitness consultants want to implement dramatic changes that could disrupt existing revenue streams. I need someone who understands both the business aspects and the operational realities." This was the opening I had been hoping for. "I might be able to help with that. I've done operational assessments for several facilities during my time at Premier Wellness. Would you be interested in a preliminary evaluation?" Bob's interest was immediate and obvious. What would that involve? I outlined a comprehensive assessment process that would identify operational strengths and weaknesses, evaluate staff performance and qualifications, analyze member satisfaction and retention data, and provide recommendations for improvement. The scope was professional and thorough, designed to address exactly the concerns Bob had expressed. "This sounds like exactly what I need," Bob said. "What kind of timeline are we talking about?" "I could have a preliminary assessment ready within 2 weeks. Full analysis and recommendations would take about a month, depending on access to operational data, and staff interviews. We shook hands on a consulting agreement that would give me legitimate authority to evaluate every aspect of Iron Peak's operations. Bob seemed relieved to have found a qualified professional who understood his challenges and could provide practical solutions. As I drove home from our meeting, I realized that everything was falling into place exactly as I had planned. In 2 weeks, I would present Bob Stevens with a comprehensive analysis that would make Ashley's incompetence impossible to ignore. But more than that, I would demonstrate my own qualifications to lead Iron Peak's transformation into the facility it could become. Ashley Roberts had humiliated me publicly, assuming I was just another amateur wife who could be intimidated into silence. Instead, she had triggered a chain of events that would expose her fraud and replace her authority with legitimate expertise. The trap was set, and Ashley had no idea she was about to walk directly into it. The next 2 weeks transformed my relationship with Iron Peak Fitness in ways that Ashley couldn't have anticipated. Armed with Bob's official consulting agreement, I had legitimate authority to observe operations, interview staff members, and review financial records that revealed the full scope of problems under Ashley's informal leadership. My assessment began with a comprehensive review of staff qualifications and training protocols. What I discovered was even worse than I had suspected. Ashley had hired 3 trainers over the past year, all lacking proper certifications from recognized organizations. She had created her own internal training program that taught methods contradicting established exercise science, and she required new hires to sign agreements, preventing them from discussing training techniques with outside professionals. Marcus Johnson proved to be an invaluable source of information about Ashley's management style. During our confidential interview, he revealed that Ashley had systematically pushed out experienced trainers who questioned her methods, replacing them with younger, less qualified staff who depended entirely on her guidance. She creates an environment where questioning her approaches is seen as disloyalty, Marcus explained. New trainers are taught that other fitness professionals are stuck in outdated thinking and that Ashley's methods represent the future of the industry. Anyone who brings up different approaches or suggests alternative techniques gets marginalized until they quit. Marcus had survived only because his client base was large enough to generate significant revenue for the gym, making him too valuable to eliminate. But he described feeling professionally isolated and frustrated by his inability to provide clients with optimal training without contradicting Ashley's established protocols. The financial records painted an equally disturbing picture. Ashley had negotiated a commission structure that gave her a percentage of all personal training revenue generated by the department, regardless of which trainer actually provided the service. This meant she profited from other trainers' work while providing minimal supervision or support. Additionally, she had been charging premium rates for specialized services that were actually basic training techniques rebranded with impressive-sounding names. Client retention data revealed that members who worked with Ashley had significantly higher cancellation rates than those who trained with other staff members. Exit surveys consistently mentioned feeling intimidated, judged, or inadequately supported during training sessions. Several former members specifically mentioned gender-based treatment differences that made women feel unwelcome or incompetent. Most damaging was discovering that Ashley had been falsifying continuing education records required for trainer certification maintenance. She claimed credits from seminars and workshops she had never attended, using forged certificates to maintain credentials that should have lapsed months earlier. This represented not just professional misconduct, but potential legal liability for the gym. During my second week of assessment, Ashley's behavior toward me shifted dramatically. She had clearly noticed my increased presence at the gym and my conversations with staff members, but she misinterpreted my activities as attempts to integrate more fully into Iron Peak's social environment. "I'm glad to see you taking a more serious interest in fitness culture," she told me during our Thursday training session. "Maybe we can move beyond basic movements and start working on some real athletic development." Ashley had convinced herself that her intimidation tactics were working, that I was becoming a compliant client who accepted her authority without question. She began pushing me toward more expensive training packages, suggesting specialized programs that would require multiple sessions per week at premium rates. I've been developing an exclusive program for women over 40 who want to compete at higher levels, she explained, her voice taking on the practiced tone of someone delivering a prepared sales pitch. It's intensive, but for someone ready to make a real commitment to transformation, the results are incredible. The program she described was essentially standard strength training dressed up with pseudo-scientific terminology and packaged at 3 times the normal rate. Ashley claimed her methods could reverse hormonal changes associated with aging, eliminate metabolic dysfunction, and create muscle development that was impossible through conventional training. None of these claims had any basis in legitimate exercise science. The investment is significant, Ashley continued. But think about how much you're willing to spend on becoming the woman you really want to be. Most of my exclusive clients find that the financial commitment actually motivates them to take the program more seriously. She quoted a price that would have funded a complete home gym setup, positioned as a test of my dedication to personal improvement. Ashley was simultaneously trying to extract maximum profit from our relationship, while reinforcing the narrative that expensive training was necessary for real results. I expressed interest in learning more, which encouraged Ashley to become even more expansive about her supposed expertise and unique methods. Every conversation provided additional documentation of false claims and predatory sales tactics that would become part of my comprehensive report to Bob. Meanwhile, my interviews with current and former gym members revealed patterns of behavior that extended far beyond individual personality conflicts. Sarah Martinez, a longtime member who had recently canceled her membership, described feeling systematically excluded from peak-hour training slots that were reserved for Ashley's preferred clients. She created this hierarchy where some members were treated like VIPs and others were made to feel like they were taking up space, Sarah explained. If you were young, attractive, and willing to pay premium rates, you got Ashley's full attention and access to the best equipment during busy times. Everyone else was scheduled during off-peak hours and given minimal attention. Lisa Thompson shared similar experiences about group fitness classes, where Ashley would interrupt other instructors to provide corrections that were actually criticisms designed to embarrass participants. Several women described feeling so uncomfortable that they stopped attending classes entirely, despite having paid for annual memberships. These patterns revealed that Ashley hadn't just created individual problems, she had systematically transformed Iron Peak's culture in ways that violated both professional standards and basic principles of customer service. The gym was hemorrhaging members, particularly women, because Ashley had made the environment hostile for anyone who didn't fit her narrow definition of serious athletes. On Friday of my second assessment week, I encountered an unexpected complication. David arrived at Iron Peak for his regular training session and found me conducting interviews in the consultation room adjacent to the main workout floor. "Jen, what are you doing here?" he asked, his confusion obvious. "I thought your session with Ashley was canceled today." I explained about the consulting work I had undertaken for Bob Stevens, watching David's expression shift from confusion to something approaching alarm. It clearly hadn't occurred to him that I might pursue professional opportunities at Iron Peak, or that my presence there might extend beyond personal fitness training. "You're doing business consulting for the gym?" he repeated. "When did this happen?" Bob approached me last week after learning about my industry background. He's been looking for professional guidance on operational improvements. David's face flushed slightly. "You never mentioned you were talking to the owner about business opportunities. You never mentioned that Ashley didn't know about my professional background," I replied evenly. "It seems we've both been selective about what information we've shared." This exchange revealed the extent to which David had compartmentalized his relationships keeping his home life separate from his gym activities in ways that now seemed deliberately deceptive. He had allowed Ashley to treat me with disrespect based on incomplete information, while simultaneously failing to recognize that my expertise might be valuable to the facility he frequented regularly. "This is going to create problems," David said, his voice tight with anxiety. "Ashley won't appreciate having her management questioned by someone she's been training." "Ashley isn't actually a manager," I pointed out. "She's a trainer who has assumed authority she was never officially given. That's part of what Bob asked me to evaluate." David left the gym without completing his training session, his discomfort obvious to anyone observing the interaction. Within an hour, Ashley appeared at the consultation room, her professional mask barely concealing anger and frustration. "I understand you've been conducting some kind of investigation into gym operations," she said, closing the door behind her with deliberate force. "I think there are some misunderstandings that need to be clarified." Ashley launched into a defensive explanation of her role at Iron Peak, emphasizing her contributions to revenue growth and member satisfaction. She positioned herself as the driving force behind the gym's success, claiming credit for improvements that predated her employment, and minimizing the significance of member complaints or staff turnover. "Bob hired me to transform this facility from a basic gym into a serious training environment," she declared. "Some people resist change, especially older members who are comfortable with mediocrity. But the results speak for themselves in terms of the caliber of athletes we now attract." The irony was striking. Ashley was essentially admitting that she had deliberately made Iron Peak unwelcoming to certain demographics, particularly older members and women who didn't meet her standards. For serious athletes, she saw this exclusion as evidence of success rather than recognizing it as discriminatory business practice that was reducing the gym's market reach. "I'm concerned about the scope of your assessment," Ashley continued. "Bob may not understand the potential damage that could result from outside interference with proven systems. I hope you'll be careful not to recommend changes that could undermine the progress we've made." This was Ashley's attempt to influence my report before its completion, positioning herself as the protector of Iron Peak's success against misguided external recommendations. She clearly believed that Bob's decision to hire a consultant reflected temporary frustration rather than serious concerns about current operations. "I appreciate your perspective," I said diplomatically. "Bob will certainly want to consider input from all stakeholders before making any operational changes." Ashley left the consultation room with obvious satisfaction, convinced that she had successfully managed the threat I represented to her authority. She had no idea that our conversation had provided additional documentation of the territorial behavior and resistance to accountability that characterized her leadership style. That weekend, I compiled my preliminary findings into a comprehensive report that would fundamentally alter Iron Peak's operational structure. The document outlined 17 specific areas where current practices violated industry standards, exposed the gym to legal liability, or damaged member satisfaction and retention. The financial analysis was particularly damning. Under Ashley's informal leadership, Iron Peak had lost 37% of its female membership, reduced group fitness participation by 55%, and generated complaint rates that were triple the industry average. The premium pricing structure she had implemented for personal training was generating short-term revenue increases, but creating long-term sustainability problems through poor client retention. Most importantly, the report documented Ashley's lack of legitimate credentials and her pattern of hiring unqualified staff. This represented immediate liability exposure that could result in insurance claims, regulatory sanctions, or lawsuits if clients were injured while receiving inappropriate training guidance. I also included a comprehensive transformation plan that addressed each identified problem with specific, actionable solutions. The plan outlined how Iron Peak could rebuild its reputation, expand its market reach, and create sustainable revenue growth through improved operations and professional management. Monday morning, I delivered the preliminary report to Bob Stevens at his Sedona office, driving the 2 hours to present my findings in person. Bob had cleared his entire morning calendar, recognizing that this assessment could determine Iron Peak's future viability. "This is more comprehensive than I expected," Bob said, reviewing the executive summary. "Some of these findings are quite concerning." I walked through each major issue, providing context and explaining the potential consequences of maintaining current practices. Bob's expression grew increasingly serious as he absorbed the scope of problems that had developed under his remote management approach. "The liability exposure alone is significant," I explained. "Insurance companies are increasingly scrutinizing fitness facility operations, and some of the practices documented here could void coverage if claims arise." "What about Ashley specifically?" Bob asked. "She's been positioning herself as essential to the gym's success." I presented the documentation of Ashley's false credentials, discriminatory practices, and violations of professional standards. Bob reviewed the evidence carefully, his business experience helping him understand the legal and financial risks associated with retaining unqualified staff in positions of authority. "I had no idea the problems were this extensive," Bob admitted. "Ashley has been very convincing about her contributions to the gym's performance." "She's skilled at managing perceptions," I agreed. "But the objective data tells a different story about member satisfaction and retention." Bob spent several minutes reviewing the transformation plan, asking detailed questions about implementation timelines, staffing requirements, and expected outcomes. His business background helped him appreciate the comprehensive approach I had developed for addressing Iron Peak's challenges. "This level of change would require new management," Bob observed. "Someone with the expertise to oversee implementation and ensure sustainable improvements." "That's correct. The current informal structure isn't adequate for managing a facility of this size and complexity." Bob closed the report and looked at me directly. "Would you be interested in taking on that management role? Based on what I'm seeing here, you understand exactly what needs to be done." The offer I had been working toward was finally on the table. I'd be very interested in discussing that possibility. We spent the next hour outlining the scope of a management position that would give me complete authority over Iron Peak's operations. Bob was clearly relieved to have found someone with the qualifications and vision to transform his struggling investment into a successful business. As I drove back to Phoenix that afternoon, I reflected on how completely the situation had reversed. From 2 weeks earlier, Ashley's public humiliation had triggered a chain of events that would not only remove her from her position of authority, but replace her with someone who actually possessed the expertise she had claimed. Tuesday morning, Bob Stevens called an all-staff meeting at Iron Peak to announce operational changes that would take effect immediately. Ashley arrived at the meeting confident and relaxed, expecting routine announcements about schedule adjustments or equipment updates. The atmosphere shifted dramatically when Bob introduced me as Iron Peak's new director of operations, with complete authority over staffing, programming, and facility management. Ashley's face went through a series of expressions, from confusion to disbelief to barely controlled rage. "Effective immediately," Bob announced, "all training staff will need to provide updated certification documentation and undergo competency assessment. Anyone unable to meet professional standards will be offered retraining or transition assistance." Ashley stood up abruptly, her professional composure finally cracking completely. "This is ridiculous, Bob. You're destroying everything we've built here based on advice from someone who hasn't worked in the industry for years." The room fell silent as everyone absorbed Ashley's open challenge to the owner's authority. Bob remained calm but firm in his response. "The assessment was thorough and professional. The recommendations are based on industry best practices and financial necessity." Ashley's voice rose with desperation and anger. "You have no idea what you're doing. This gym was nothing before I transformed it into a serious training facility. You're making a huge mistake." "The meeting is concluded," Bob said firmly. Jennifer will be scheduling individual meetings with all staff members to discuss the transition process. Ashley stormed out of the meeting room, her exit dramatic enough to confirm everyone's suspicions about her emotional instability and poor leadership temperament. The remaining staff members seemed relieved rather than upset, suggesting that Ashley's departure was overdue. Marcus Johnson approached me after the meeting, his smile genuine and grateful. "I can't tell you how glad I am to see professional management finally taking over. This place has incredible potential that's been completely wasted." By the end of that week, Ashley Roberts had submitted her resignation rather than undergo the competency assessment that would have exposed her lack of legitimate qualifications. Her departure was followed by the immediate resignation of the 3 unqualified trainers she had hired, leaving Iron Peak with a small but properly credentialed staff ready to rebuild the facility's reputation. David's reaction to these developments was complicated and revealing. He seemed simultaneously proud of my professional success and threatened by the shift in power dynamics that made Ashley's judgment and authority irrelevant. "I guess you showed everyone who the real expert is," he said, his tone carrying undertones of resentment and admiration. Ashley certainly didn't see this coming. "No," I agreed quietly. "She didn't." The woman who had humiliated me publicly, dismissing my expertise and declaring that wives should stay out of the gym, had been completely removed from her position of power. But more importantly, Iron Peak Fitness was about to become the kind of facility I had always envisioned, where every member felt welcome and supported regardless of age, gender, or fitness level. 6 months after taking over as Director of Operations at Iron Peak Fitness, I stood in the newly renovated group fitness studio, watching our evening yoga class reach capacity for the 3rd consecutive week. The transformation of the facility had exceeded even my most optimistic projections, but the personal transformation I had undergone felt even more profound. The woman who had once allowed herself to be publicly humiliated by an unqualified trainer had evolved into a confident business leader who had built Iron Peak into one of Phoenix's most respected fitness facilities. The journey from that moment of shame to this position of strength had required every skill I had developed during my 15 years in the industry, but it had also demanded that I rediscover parts of myself I had buried during my years of supporting other people's dreams. The first major challenge had been rebuilding Iron Peak's staff with qualified professionals who shared my vision of inclusive, evidence-based fitness instruction. Marcus Johnson had become my assistant director, his expertise in program development helping us create training protocols that actually delivered results for clients of all fitness levels. We hired 3 additional trainers, each possessing legitimate certifications and demonstrated experience working with diverse populations. The cultural transformation proved more complex than simply changing personnel. Ashley's 18-month reign had created an environment where certain behaviors and attitudes had become normalized among both staff and members. Some clients expected the kind of preferential treatment Ashley had provided to her favored demographic, while others had internalized feelings of inadequacy that made them hesitant to fully engage with our new programming. Sarah Martinez, the U.S. marketing executive who had described feeling intimidated during Ashley's group fitness classes, became one of our most enthusiastic success stories. When I approached her about returning to Iron Peak, she was skeptical about whether the toxic culture had really changed. "I appreciated you reaching out," she told me during our meeting at a coffee shop near her office, "but I'm not sure I'm ready to deal with that kind of environment again." Ashley made me feel like I was wasting everyone's time just by showing up. I explained the comprehensive changes we had implemented, including new instructor training protocols that emphasized encouragement over criticism, modified class structures that accommodated different skill levels, and strict policies against any form of discrimination or intimidation. But I could see that Sarah needed more than words to believe that Iron Peak had truly transformed. "Would you be willing to try a complimentary session with me personally?" I offered. "I understand your hesitation, and I want to demonstrate that we've created something completely different from what you experienced before." Sarah agreed to a single training session, approaching Iron Peak's entrance with visible anxiety. The moment she stepped inside, her posture began to relax. The atmosphere was welcoming and energetic, with staff members greeting every person who entered with genuine enthusiasm. The equipment areas that had once felt exclusive and intimidating now bustled with members of all ages and fitness levels working together comfortably. During our session, I focused on understanding Sarah's fitness goals and designing movements that challenged her appropriately while building confidence rather than highlighting limitations. We discussed her previous negative experiences and how those interactions had affected her relationship with exercise, then developed strategies for overcoming those psychological barriers. "This feels completely different," Sarah admitted as we finished our workout. "I actually enjoyed myself instead of feeling judged every minute." Sarah became a regular member again within 2 weeks, and her enthusiasm attracted several friends who had also left Iron Peak during Ashley's tenure. Word spread through Phoenix's professional community that Iron Peak had transformed into a facility that actually delivered on its promises of supporting every member's fitness journey. The financial results of our transformation were equally impressive. Within 4 months, we had not only recovered the female membership that had fled during Ashley's reign, but had attracted new demographics that had never considered Iron Peak before. Our group fitness program expanded from 12 weekly classes to 37, with specialty programs for seniors, postpartum mothers, and individuals managing chronic health conditions. Personal training revenue increased by 68%, but more importantly, client retention rates improved dramatically. Instead of churning through dissatisfied customers who canceled after a few sessions, we built long-term relationships that generated sustainable income while actually helping people achieve their goals. Bob Stevens visited the Phoenix facility monthly now, his relief and satisfaction obvious as he observed the positive changes in both atmosphere and financial performance. During one of our quarterly reviews, he reflected on how dramatically the situation had evolved. "I have to admit, when I first hired you as a consultant, I was hoping you could identify a few operational improvements," he said, reviewing our latest membership and revenue reports. "I never imagined we would need to completely rebuild the facility's culture and management structure." "Sometimes surface problems reflect deeper systemic issues," I replied. Ashley's behavior was a symptom of inadequate oversight and unclear professional standards. Addressing those root causes required comprehensive changes. "The liability issues alone could have destroyed the business," Bob acknowledged. "I had no idea how much risk we were carrying with unqualified staff and discriminatory practices." The legal vulnerabilities I had identified in my initial assessment had proven even more serious than originally projected. 3 former members had filed complaints with state regulatory agencies about inappropriate training advice they had received from Ashley's staff. While these complaints were ultimately resolved without penalties, they served as stark reminders of the consequences that could have resulted from maintaining those practices. Our new operational protocols included mandatory continuing education for all staff, regular audits of training methods and client interactions, and clear policies regarding professional conduct and customer service. These changes not only reduced liability exposure, but created an environment where staff members felt supported and empowered to provide excellent service. The transformation extended beyond Iron Peak's walls into the broader Phoenix fitness community. Other gym owners began reaching out for consultation on improving their own operations, recognizing that the standards we had implemented were becoming expectations among educated consumers. I found myself speaking at industry conferences and contributing to trade publications about creating inclusive fitness environments that served diverse populations effectively. This unexpected expansion of my professional influence led to opportunities I hadn't anticipated when I first began planning my return to the fitness industry. A major fitness equipment manufacturer asked me to serve on their advisory board for developing products suitable for mature adults. a national training organization, invited me to help design certification programs focused on working with women over 40. Most satisfying was the launch of Iron Peak's Women's Leadership in Fitness program, a monthly workshop series that helped women develop confidence and expertise in gym environments that had traditionally intimidated them. The program attracted participants from across the Phoenix metropolitan area, many sharing stories similar to my own experience of feeling dismissed or marginalized in fitness settings. During one particularly memorable workshop, Lisa Thompson, the teacher who had described feeling humiliated in Ashley's group fitness classes, shared her transformation with the group. 6 months ago, I was afraid to even enter a gym, she told the assembled women. I had convinced myself that fitness was for other people, that I was too out of shape to belong in those spaces. Jennifer and her team didn't just teach me exercises. They helped me reclaim my right to take up space and pursue my goals without apologizing for my starting point. These stories reinforced my understanding of how much damage Ashley's approach had caused, not just to Iron Peak's business, but to individual women's confidence and willingness to prioritize their health. The ripple effects of toxic fitness culture extended far beyond single facilities, influencing how entire communities thought about exercise and personal improvement. My relationship with David evolved in ways that reflected the broader changes in my life and priorities. Initially, he struggled to adjust to my professional success and the shift in our dynamic from my supporting his career to both of us pursuing meaningful work. The confident, accomplished woman I had become was different from the accommodating wife who had moved to Phoenix 3 years earlier. I'm proud of what you've built at Iron Peak, he told me during one of our increasingly rare, quiet evenings together. But I have to admit, sometimes I feel like I don't know who you are anymore. I'm the same person I always was, I replied. I just stopped hiding parts of myself to make other people more comfortable. David's relationship with fitness had also changed dramatically after Ashley's departure from Iron Peak. Initially, he seemed lost without her guidance and validation, uncertain about how to maintain his workout routine without her constant encouragement and attention. He tried training with Marcus for several weeks, but the professional, results-focused approach was less emotionally satisfying than Ashley's ego-stroking methods. Eventually, David joined a different gym across town, one that offered the kind of atmosphere he apparently preferred. His choice felt symbolic of the growing distance between us, not just physically, but in terms of values and priorities. The person who had allowed his wife to be publicly humiliated rather than defending her expertise was not someone I could continue to respect or trust completely. Our daughter Sophia, now a senior in high school, had watched my transformation with interest and pride. She had never liked Ashley, describing her as fake and mean after meeting her at a gym event, and she was thrilled to see me reclaim my professional identity. I used to worry that you were shrinking, Sophia told me one afternoon as we toured college campuses in California. Like you were making yourself smaller to fit into Dad's life, but now you're expanding again, becoming more yourself instead of less. Sophia's observation captured something essential about the journey I had undertaken. The process of responding to Ashley's humiliation had forced me to rediscover capabilities and ambitions I had set aside, but it had also required me to examine why I had been willing to diminish myself in the first place. The success at Iron Peak opened doors to opportunities that extended far beyond gym management. A prominent fitness industry investment firm recruited me to evaluate acquisition targets, leveraging my expertise in identifying operational problems and transformation potential. 2 different equipment manufacturers offered executive positions that would have required relocating, but provided significant career advancement opportunities. Most intriguingly, a group of women entrepreneurs approached me about opening a second Iron Peak location specifically designed around the inclusive, evidence-based principles we had implemented in Phoenix. The proposed facility would serve as a model for how fitness centers could better serve women, older adults, and other populations that traditional gyms often fail to support effectively. We want to create something that doesn't just accommodate different needs, but actually celebrates the diversity of human bodies and goals, explained Maria Rodriguez, the lead investor in the proposed venture. Your work at Iron Peak has demonstrated that inclusive practices aren't just ethically right, but financially successful. The opportunity to expand Iron Peak's model appealed to me enormously, but it would require significant time and energy investments that might conflict with my current responsibilities. After extensive discussions with Bob Stevens, we developed a partnership structure that would allow me to pursue the expansion while maintaining my role at the original facility. The planning process for Iron Peak North reminded me of why I had fallen in love with the fitness industry originally. We designed every aspect of the facility with intentionality, from equipment selection that accommodated different physical capabilities to lighting and music systems that created welcoming, rather than intimidating atmospheres. Staff training protocols emphasized meeting people where they were, rather than imposing predetermined standards of fitness or dedication. Programming included options for every schedule and interest level, from high-intensity training for competitive athletes to gentle movement classes for individuals managing health conditions. Most importantly, we built accountability systems that would prevent the kind of toxic culture Ashley had created from ever taking root. Regular member feedback surveys, anonymous reporting systems for inappropriate staff behavior, and transparent policies regarding pricing and service delivery would ensure that Iron Peak North maintained the inclusive values that had driven our success. The grand opening of Iron Peak North attracted attention from fitness industry publications and local media outlets interested in our innovative approach to gym culture. The coverage highlighted how we had addressed common barriers that prevented women and older adults from feeling comfortable in traditional fitness environments. Iron Peak represents an evolution in fitness culture, wrote the reporter from Phoenix Business Journal. By prioritizing inclusion and evidence-based practices over intimidation and pseudoscience, they've created a model that other facilities are already beginning to emulate. The article included quotes from several members who described their experiences at both the original Iron Peak and other gyms in the area. The contrast was striking, with people consistently mentioning feeling welcomed, supported, and respected in ways they hadn't experienced elsewhere. One quote particularly resonated with me. Janet Morrison, a 62-year-old retired teacher, described her first visit to Iron Peak after years of avoiding gyms due to previous negative experiences. I expected to feel out of place and judged based on what I'd encountered at other facilities, she said. Instead, I found people who were genuinely interested in helping me achieve my goals without making me feel embarrassed about my starting point. The difference between this environment and what I'd experienced before was like night and day. Reading these testimonials reinforced my understanding of how much the fitness industry needed the kind of transformation we were modeling. Too many facilities operated on principles of exclusion and intimidation, creating environments that served only narrow demographics while alienating the broader population that could benefit from regular exercise. As Iron Peak North approached its first anniversary, I reflected on the remarkable journey that had brought me from that moment of public humiliation to a position of industry leadership. Ashley Roberts had intended to diminish me, to establish her superiority by highlighting my supposed inadequacies. Instead, she had triggered a transformation that had restored my professional confidence while creating something genuinely beneficial for hundreds of people. The irony wasn't lost on me that Ashley's attempt to exclude wives from gym environments had ultimately resulted in the creation of facilities specifically designed to welcome and support women who had been marginalized elsewhere. Her narrow definition of who belonged in fitness spaces had inspired a comprehensive reimagining of how those spaces could operate more inclusively. I occasionally wondered what had become of Ashley after her resignation from Iron Peak. Social media indicated that she had moved to Las Vegas and was working at a small boutique training studio, her client base apparently limited to the demographic she had always preferred. Her online presence had diminished significantly, suggesting that her influence in the fitness industry had waned along with her access to a platform like Iron Peak. Marcus Johnson, who had been promoted to general manager of the original Iron Peak location, sometimes mentioned hearing industry gossip about Ashley's struggles to establish herself in new markets. Apparently, word had spread through professional networks about the circumstances of her departure from Iron Peak, making it difficult for her to secure positions at reputable facilities. The fitness industry is smaller than people realize, Marcus observed during one of our weekly management meetings. Reputation matters, and Ashley's tendency to oversell her qualifications and undermine colleagues doesn't play well with experienced professionals. While I felt no particular satisfaction in Ashley's professional difficulties, I was grateful that her influence could no longer damage other women's confidence or compromise facility operations through incompetent management. The industry was better served by qualified professionals who understood both the science of exercise and the importance of creating supportive environments for all participants. My own reputation had evolved in directions I couldn't have anticipated when I first returned to Phoenix. Industry publications regularly sought my perspective on topics ranging from operational efficiency to addressing discrimination in fitness settings. Speaking invitations took me to conferences across the country, where I shared insights about creating inclusive gym cultures and implementing evidence-based training protocols. The professional recognition was gratifying, but more meaningful was the direct impact on individual lives that I witnessed daily at both Iron Peak locations. Women who had been intimidated by previous gym experiences were discovering strength and confidence they hadn't known they possessed. Older adults who had assumed their most active days were behind them were setting and achieving ambitious fitness goals. People managing chronic health conditions were finding that appropriate exercise could significantly improve their quality of life. These transformations reminded me why I had chosen to work in fitness originally. Before years of supporting other people's dreams had caused me to lose sight of my own passion for helping people discover what their bodies could accomplish. The journey from Ashley's public humiliation to industry leadership had restored not just my professional identity, but my sense of purpose and contribution. During a recent leadership retreat for Iron Peak's management team, I shared reflections on the lessons learned during our transformation process. The discussion touched on the importance of maintaining high standards while remaining accessible, the challenge of balancing business needs with social responsibility, and the ongoing work required to create genuinely inclusive environments. The easiest thing would have been to accept Ashley's assessment and find a different gym, I told the group. But sometimes the biggest opportunities come disguised as problems that force us to question assumptions and find better solutions. The retreat concluded with planning sessions for Iron Peak's continued expansion, including potential locations in other Arizona cities and partnerships with healthcare systems interested in integrating fitness programming into patient care. The growth possibilities were exciting, but I was determined to maintain the values and practices that had driven our success. As I drove home from the retreat through the Arizona desert, I thought about how completely my life had changed since that evening when Ashley Roberts had declared that wives should stay out of the gym. The woman who had made that pronouncement was gone, her authority revealed as fraudulent, and her methods exposed as harmful. In her place, authentic expertise had created something beneficial that would outlast any individual personality or ego. The fitness facilities bearing the Iron Peak name now represented everything Ashley had opposed. Inclusive environments where people of all backgrounds felt welcome, evidence-based programming that actually delivered results, and professional leadership that prioritized member success over personal aggrandizement. The transformation was complete, but the impact would continue expanding as other facilities adopted similar approaches. Sophia was completing her freshman year at UCLA, studying business administration with interests in social entrepreneurship. During our regular video calls, she often mentioned how inspiring it was to watch me rebuild my career while creating something meaningful for other people. "You didn't just get revenge on that trainer," she told me recently. "You made her irrelevant by being so much better at everything she claimed to be expert in. That's way more satisfying than just getting her fired." Sophia's observation captured something essential about the journey I had undertaken. The goal had never been simply to punish Ashley for her misconduct, though justice had certainly been served. The real victory was demonstrating that expertise, integrity, and inclusive leadership could create results that no amount of intimidation or false credentials could match. The 2 Iron Peak locations now employed 47 people, served over 3,000 members, and had become models for how fitness facilities could operate more ethically and effectively. Industry consultants regularly visited to study our practices, and several equipment manufacturers had developed products specifically designed for the inclusive programming we pioneered. More personally, I had rediscovered confidence and capability that years of self-sacrifice had obscured. The woman who had once defined herself primarily as David's wife and Sophia's mother had evolved into someone whose identity encompassed professional leadership, industry expertise, and meaningful contribution to her community. The relationship with David continued evolving as we both adjusted to the reality that I was no longer willing to subordinate my goals to his preferences. Counseling sessions helped us navigate this transition, though it remained unclear whether we could build a partnership that honored both of our authentic selves, rather than requiring one of us to diminish our potential. "I'm proud of what you've accomplished," David told me during one particularly honest conversation. "But I also miss the version of you that made my life the center of your universe. I know that's selfish, but it's how I feel." His admission was painful, but not surprising. The accommodating wife who had moved to Phoenix to support his career advancement had been convenient for David, even if that role had required me to abandon my own professional aspirations. The confident business leader I had become demanded more equal partnership and shared decision-making. Whether our marriage could evolve to accommodate this new dynamic remained an open question, but I was no longer willing to sacrifice my authentic self to preserve relationships that required my diminishment. The journey from Ashley's humiliation to professional restoration had taught me that some things were worth fighting for, including my own potential and contribution. As I prepared for another day of leadership at Iron Peak, I reflected on the unexpected gift Ashley Roberts had given me through her attempt to humiliate and exclude me. By underestimating my capabilities and trying to diminish my confidence, she had inadvertently triggered a transformation that restored my professional identity while creating something beneficial for countless other people. The woman who had declared that wives should stay out of the gym had resigned in disgrace, her authority exposed as fraudulent and her methods revealed as harmful. In her place stood facilities dedicated to welcoming everyone, regardless of age, gender, or fitness level, and proving that inclusive practices were not just ethically superior, but financially successful. The transformation was complete, but the impact would continue expanding as long as people remembered that expertise earned through dedication and service would always triumph over authority claimed through intimidation and deception. Iron Peak. Fitness had become more than just a business. It was a demonstration that sometimes the best response to injustice is simply becoming so excellent that the perpetrators become irrelevant. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.